I asked Lord Carlile as to whether we can anticipate change.
It's difficult to foresee any change, unfortunately. That's why this situation is so troubling. That is why so many of my colleagues in the senior end of the UK legal professions and in the UK Parliament are concerned about what is occurring in Bangladesh. And many of us are people who've been to Bangladesh, who've observed Bangladesh developing over the years, who see Bangladesh as potentially a huge success story. I mean, leaving aside recent tragedies, if you look at the Bangladesh garment industry, it's massive. Every man, woman and child in the United Kingdom, knowingly or unknowingly, is buying good quality Bangladesh-made goods in the shops in which we buy our clothing in the United Kingdom. There is tremendous further potential. Bangladesh has it in it to be a tiger economy, to be the next tiger economy. India is already on the way. It could be Bangladesh next, but in order for Bangladesh to achieve that, it must take its place in the family of nations with a proper legal system. Because I can tell you, as a politician, as a parent, as a grandparent here, people who shop in London, where I live, are now asking questions as to whether their goods are made in Bangladesh or not. And they will choose not to buy Bangladeshi goods.
Do you think the situation there with the strikes, with all that's going on, is interfering with the progression in Bangladesh in light of companies going out, interference within these? We saw with the Rana Plaza factory collapse, a junior Awami League leader at the helm of the company, and we've seen a lot of corruption there. Do you think these things are holding the industry back?
Well, I think demonstrations undoubtedly hold the industry back, but it does not mean that they are illegitimate. If I were a resident of Bangladesh, I would be demonstrating, because otherwise I would feel completely powerless to change the policies of the government. I know, because I have contact with a few of them, that some of Bangladesh's potential young leaders, very able people, are involved in these demonstrations, not because they want to demonstrate on the streets. They would actually like to be involved in the development of Bangladesh's economy, its professions, its industry, its politics. But they feel that there is nothing else they can do, and that if they don't, then they will just be frustratingly powerless.
We see different types of demonstrations. We see those of the factory workers coming out because of their pay. We see those who have come out on both sides of the Shahbag calling for the death penalty in Bangladesh. And then we see the others, junior Jamaat-e-Islam figures, those of Chateau Shibir, demonstrations all over. Currently there was a 3-day strike asked for by the BNP, the opposition party, and 15 lives lost just in those 3 days. Will the elections, do you think, incite more of this sort of violence?
Well, I think this sort of violence is almost inevitably going to increase as the elections approach, and I think that the potential for an entirely peaceful election is regrettably quite low. The situation could easily be changed. It would take further conversations between the leaders of the main political groups to come to the common sense conclusion that they really ought to ratchet down the extremely emotive level of opposition between the two parties in Bangladesh. I think it would be a great example to the rest of the region if there could be a well-organised, compliant election and a transition of government that did not have revenge at the top of the list if there is to be a change of government.
Protests have been taking place throughout the world, and here in Britain, the British Bangladeshi community have also been coming out to voice their concerns.
The last time I spoke to the Bangladeshi High Commissioner here in Britain, I spoke to him about some of these demonstrations, including those right outside of the Bangladeshi High Commission, where British Bangladeshis came out to protest the current dealings of the governing Awami League. And he said to me, this is but a small fraction of people, that the majority of Bangladeshis are in support of the International Crimes Tribunal. If the Bangladeshis themselves are behind some of these doings, can the international community then have any influence?
Well, I think the international community can have influence. It is a characteristic of the Bangladeshi community in the United Kingdom that they're not very political. They're, many of them, very hard, most of them, very hard-working people who just get on with their lives in their communities. The fact that any Bangladeshis who live in the United Kingdom, many of them second or third generation, are actually coming out to demonstrate is quite remarkable in my view. I used to live very close to a substantial Bangladeshi community in Lancashire, in the northwest of England, who were characterised by being quiet, peaceful and hard-working, and much respected for it. Not a very open community, but a close and well-run community, well-ordered community. Demonstrating is against their instinct. So I think these demonstrations are much more important than the High Commissioner is saying. And of course the High Commissioner is an instrument of the Bangladesh government. You remember that. I mean, the High Commissioner does nothing independent of his government.
We know that Britain is the biggest donor in Bangladesh. What should the British community and British parliamentarians, individuals such as yourself, what can they be doing in order to ensure better proceedings in Bangladesh?
We try to influence, by we, I mean we parliamentarians who take an interest, try and influence the British government. And that means we have to influence the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office, the Foreign Office. And we have been trying for some time to persuade ministers in the British government to take a stronger line with the Bangladesh government over the war crimes tribunals. The British ministers concerned have not been terribly enthusiastic about this.
This is the issue, isn't it? It doesn't actually go any further forward. Sort of things are highlighted and then that's it.
British ministers are very keen to repeat that they do not want to intervene in the affairs of a foreign government. And of course they're right not to intervene in the affairs of a foreign government. It would be monstrous if they intervened in religious affairs in Bangladesh or something of that kind, or sports policy in Bangladesh. But where there are clear breaches of international legal norms, in my view, the United Kingdom government should be heard to be shouting from the rooftops, this will not do. And I welcome the opportunity to appear on your channel and to say to anyone who cares to listen in Bangladesh, and particularly the government, this will not do. It just won't do, because this is diminishing the responsibility of Bangladesh in the eyes of jurists around the world, and it happens to be killing a few people as well, and that's not acceptable.
Bangladesh's bloody history seems to be that which plagues the country and stops it from moving forward, and the International Crimes Tribunal flawed with accusations of corruption. I asked Lord Carlile if these trials should possibly be taken abroad.
The International Criminal Court is a possibility, but if I were a Bangladeshi politician, I would be saying we have a sophisticated justice system here which works pretty well in most other respects. We should be able to hold these war crimes trials in our own country on normal rules of evidence. I think also, and there are other places that set an example, South Africa, to an extent Northern Ireland, which had very violent dissent for decades. They've been able to sort out their problems by a mixture of truth and reconciliation shared between the former warring factions, and by an imaginative approach to government which allows people who may have been involved in some unsavoury activity in the past to enter into the governmental system as long as they're committed to it. I mean, I'm not saying that war criminals should be allowed to take part in government. I think war criminals should be tried in principle, but the past should be put in a box and it should be heavily labelled history. and the future should be developed by people who are not putting anything in a box but looking for progress. This is now the time for young leaders in Bangladesh. Bangladesh does not actually have young leaders at the moment. The current political leaders in Bangladesh, if I may say so, and I'm entitled to express my opinion, are history themselves and should be consigned to history. Some brilliant young people in Bangladesh. Bangladesh is ready to be run by people under 40 years old.
If young people were to take hold of the reins, do you think Bangladesh will be able to rid itself of its bloody history which is tying the country down?
Well, every country for the development of its economy needs to develop a large and able, what we would call here, middle class. And Bangladesh is developing a large and able middle class of entrepreneurs, lawyers, accountants, teachers who are extremely important, people who are multilingual, and all the rest of it. And I think that those are the people who need to lead an emerging industrial nation like Bangladesh. This should be the time for the young leaders to come forward and, not to hand over to other young leaders, but to work together and take the country forward for the next 25 years.
Do you think that's likely to happen in Bangladesh?
Well, I hope so. I mean, I can't see any reason why it shouldn't happen in Bangladesh. I know that Bangladesh has a very large, able, young middle class of people who could lead the country. Not in, the individual leaders don't matter, who would lead the country by their cohesive example, who want to prosper.
New blood is what Lord Carlile is suggesting. Is that what Bangladesh is in need of?